Hello. I picked up this metallic grey new 3DS XL from Japan. It was listed as junk and it's plain to see why. Peeling paint is quite common on these metallic coloured versions, but that may be the least of this particular console's issues. The top screen also has some physical damage and will need to be replaced. So the plan today is to tear the console down to rebuild and upgrade it into the Apex new 3DS XL. We are going to be using a brand new shell, upgrading both screens with IPS panels, and we will install a capture card to stream and record our gameplay over to a computer. We start by removing the outer plate and bottom shell to access the internals. There are 8 screws securing the bottom shell to the console. 2 of them are under the rubber feet. The 3DS line of consoles have the reputation of being one of the trickier consoles to repair, mainly due to the hinge and ribbon cables that have to be carefully arranged within. The rest of it, however, is relatively straightforward. The new 3DS models like this one are incredibly modular in their design, which adds to repairability considerably. All parts like the SD card slot, game slot, camera, volume and 3D sliders, power board, button boards, they're all separate, distinct pieces that can be replaced individually. This is in contrast to the other consoles in the family, like the original 3DS and 3DS XL, which have the majority of these components soldered down to the motherboard. This console is actually in very good condition internally. It looks like it must have just been rolling around in a box with a bunch of spanners and screwdrivers and left that way unused. The ribbon cables must be disconnected carefully from the motherboard, with minimal force to avoid ripping them. The game slot looks minty, and the motherboard is in great shape. This is the perfect console for this kind of refurbishment and restoration. Once we've got the main boards removed, we can start focusing on the upper shell by first removing the top outer cover plate. The screws for the top shell are hidden under rubber stickers, which is typical of Nintendo consoles. After unscrewing all 4 of them, we can slide the top outer cover plate towards the front of the console to remove it. To disconnect the 2 halves, the hinge must be in the open position. Then, after removing the power board and the notification LED diffuser, we can access the hinge mechanism to push it in and separate the 2 shells. We don't have to be too careful here, because the shell is all being replaced, but habits. Now, we carefully run all 3 ribbon cables and the Wi-Fi antenna through the slit in the bottom shell. With the 2 halves separated, we can remove all of the components from the top shell, including the damaged screen. The screen has 2 small ribbon cables plugged into the volume slider board. These are quite short, so they must be removed carefully. We can remove the screen by pushing it out to separate the adhesive from the shell. To get the ribbon cables through the upper shell, I begin with the screen ribbon first, as it's a different length to the others. It's a little bit longer. Then, by using a flathead pair of tweezers, we can simply roll it up and push it through the ring inside the other ribbon cables. As with anything, there are many ways to achieve the same result. I just find this easiest for me. Now that we have that mostly stripped down, we can begin the build. I've chosen a brand new Pikachu yellow shell from China, and it looks great. It'll work well. But these shells are almost never perfect. The Dremel will be coming out at some point. Mark my words. There are a lot of little pieces that we need to swap over to the new shell, and it's important we don't forget a single one. Here, we are transferring the inner camera lens and infrared diffuser. The hinge slot on the new shell can sometimes be a little tight, so it can take a bit more force. To insert the ribbon cables through the new shell, we use the same technique as before, but this time I'm going to just use my fingers to roll them up and push them through softly. There are 2 specific screen panel technologies that Nintendo used in the new 3DS line. The more common and earlier type being TN, and the other is the coveted IPS panels. You can tell which type a loose screen is by looking for the missing pin on the ribbon cable. If there is no missing pin, it's a TN. If there's a missing pin like this one, it's IPS. This is another tricky part. I like to use my nail as I find I have the most control and less risk of scratching the screen. It's best that we don't touch the actual panel at all, to make sure that there are no marks or dust after we apply the new yellow lens.
Once again, I'm using my fingers to roll up the cable. We can't use too much force as it may damage the ribbon cables. We don't want to damage this IPS screen. Another easily forgotten component is the speaker grill that stop debris from damaging the speaker or making them buzz. Now that's all we need from the top inner shell. After plugging in the screen cables to the volume slider, we must ensure that the volume slider is in the correct position so we don't snap it off. And that's the top half done. Now we shift focus back to the bottom shell so that we can transfer over the remaining parts. These are the C-stick, button membranes, front LED diffuser, D-pad board, and the thumbstick dust cap. We can see that the original bottom screen for this console is TN, as all the pins are present. So we will need to calibrate the console for the new screens to ensure they display accurately. This piece is usually the main culprit for any fitment issues with these aftermarket shells. There is often extra plastic from the molding process in the front LED location, although we seem to be fine with this one.
Now we found an issue. The face button slots and the buttons are not quite fitting right. These are the joys of aftermarket shells from China.
All of the other buttons sit in place correctly. I hate to say I told you so, but here we are. We're going to have to file down all of the buttons in their slots so they don't get stuck in place and can freely actuate.
After some painful trial, Dremel, and error, the buttons are floating in place correctly. I spy some dust under the touchscreen. This touchscreen itself is actually in fantastic condition, so there's no need to replace it. But I want to give it a quick dust to remove any little specks. Now we can install our second IPS screen and a couple components to hold it in place as we connect the two halves together. Now we can slide the ribbons through the slit and slide the hinge into the bottom inner shell. And when they are both connected, we can get the notification LED light diffuser and power board in.
The C-stick plugs into this daughter board and is then wired through this wide ribbon cable to the motherboard.
Once again, we have camera lenses that need to be transferred to the new shell before we attach the gorgeous Pikachu top outer plate.
Attaching the top plate can be a bit fiddly with aftermarket shells, but it's latching on with no issues here.
Let's get a screw down and stick it up so we can move on to the bottom shell.
We need the power button membrane and shoulder buttons from the bottom outer shell to transfer over to our new yellow buttons.
The capture card we are installing is from Optimize, formerly known as Katsukity. The installation is a little more involved than the loopy version, which also makes it a little more fun. The new 3DS XL motherboard. We've got some plans for you. And I'm not entirely sure of Nintendo's opinion on these plans, but unfortunately they don't have a choice in the matter. We need to access the screen data lines in order for the capture card to connect to and read. They are positioned right next to the ARM processor, and they connect over to the ribbon cable connectors. There's often underfill around the resistors that we'll have to remove before soldering the flex cable down.
As always, we shouldn't use too much force when scraping the underfill, so that the traces on the board aren't damaged.
Tinning up the points beforehand reduces the chance of a bad joint, as there is plenty of fresh solder already there to flow to.
After applying some flux, we can add some solder to the connection points. The vertical row of resistors in the top right are for the top screen, whilst the other collection of 6 resistors are for the bottom screen.
Switching to my other light, we can get a better view of the resistors under the flex board, so we aren't shooting in the dark.
After tacking a few points down to hold the motherboard in place, we can add flux to finish off each connection. Not bad.
Don't worry, to make an omelette you have to break a few eggs and add more flux.
After cleaning all of the flux residue with IPA, a toothbrush and a cloth, we can flip the board over to solder in the remaining connections.
Next, we can stick the card down and solder up the ground wire.
As always, we are tinning up the pads beforehand to get a solid joint.
Solder down the audio flex cable, both from the motherboard to the capture card, because these cards transmit both video and digital audio from the console.
Flux is your friend and will always help you when you are in need. Perfection.
Last up, we solder the positive and ground wires for our USB-C port so that we can charge the console from the same port as capturing. Don't worry, this won't damage anything or introduce any kind of electrical risk. This is identical to using a standard USB to 3DS charge cable. After carefully inserting the top LCD and 3D slider ribbons, we can lower in the board and connect each ribbon to their connectors on the main board. Slide in the thumbstick and microSD slot, and we have an assembled console. Well, almost. As the capture card is a bit thicker than the shell, we need to create a cut for it and also the hole for the USB-C port. We could use a Dremel, a mini drill press, an X-Acto knife and a drill, but I have something a bit bigger sitting across from me that's a bit more precise than my hands. First, we're going to cut the USB-C port. I've programmed this machine to perform the perfect cut every time. And the results speak for themselves. Now, let's switch jigs and cut out the capture card slot. There's something satisfying about watching a machine work. It's like watching a robot vacuum stroll around the house, cleaning the floors. Maybe it's because it feels like I'm doing the task, simply by watching the machine do it. I can't quite put my finger on it. I couldn't have done it better myself. Subscribe if you want to see me race him and do a man versus machine battle, although I think you could guess the winner. Now we can slide in the USB-C port, connect up the shoulder buttons, and screw down the bottom shell. The bottom plate needs its captive screws installed and the serial number applied. Then we can see the console turn on for the first time. 10 out of 10. Looks great. Everything is working.
The screens we've installed are genuine OEM Nintendo IPS screens, so I had no doubts about their condition.
Let's check out the capture card. Excellent. It's almost like I've done this before. Now, it's time to focus on the software. We need to first unlock the console so that it can play games from any region, as it's originally a Japanese console, and the 3DS line are region locked. Then we switch over the region from Japan to PAL, because I'm upside down.
Done.
And then we can install the calibration files for the IPS screens so that they look their absolute best. And we're in. Let's upgrade the SD card to 128 gigabytes. Anything more than that and I find there are drastically slower load times.
After a few more satisfying snaps, the build is complete.
I'm happy that we're able to save this forgotten and neglected console from the landfill, to give it a new lease on life and make it even better than it was when it was brand new 10 years ago. Now the final touches. I hope these peels are sufficiently satisfying for you all.
And look how far we've come. This shell is certainly one of the higher quality aftermarket shells I've come across. The colors in the print are quite accurate and the buttons and screen lens look clean. And on top of that, we have one of the best looking special edition 3DSs that exist.
After peeling off the top screen protective layer, we can see the finished build. The IPS screens have better viewing angles and are more vibrant and have better color accuracy. They also have a more sophisticated backlight that spreads more evenly across the panel.
The Pikachu theme really brings the build together whilst showing off the upgraded screens. In terms of difficulty, this build is up there, but with enough patience and plenty of practice, it is certainly possible, as we've seen today. It requires delicate precision and meticulous management for all of the different parts, and also fine micro-soldering to install the capture card. I've done many upgraded builds just like this for a variety of different consoles. Click the like button and subscribe so you don't miss my next upload. And let me know in the comments what build I should do next. Maybe a Ultimate PS2, Ultimate Original Xbox, or even an original DS shiny hunting setup using 4 consoles, all being controlled simultaneously with a single controller. The possibilities are endless, and you'll see them all here on the official Kazak's YouTube channel. Goodbye.